This is Bill Holmes with Collector's Maze, and I have a very, very important guest in this holiday season we're coming up. It's probably inspired a lot of us, and for me in my childhood. This is one of the first things I remember watching Star Wars on TV. I was like, it was an amazing thing. John Celestri, animator, an aficionado artist, but also just an aficionado and lover of the fandom of comics, Silver Age and Golden Age comics. I've been following some of your stuff, and I think it's really amazing the energy you have behind just the love of this whole genre.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
Hopefully you're having a good holiday season. I don't know if Lexington is going to be a little colder. My daughter lives close to there, so
Okay.
I know what she's dealing with. I'm in sunny San Diego, which is not so sunny today, but it's overall we were going to complain about the 70
Yeah.
degrees here.
Yeah. Well, no, we're at we've been hitting it high, but right now it's about 45 degrees.
Yeah.
Here. So, and that's warm. That's warm for this time of the year. So that's anyway. It's good. We're fine. I mean, we're Central Kentucky. Lexington is, it's about 80 miles from Cincinnati. So Cincinnati gets hit with snow a lot.
It's brutal. I grew up in a small town, Portsmouth, Ohio, which is about 80 miles kind of south east of Cincinnati. So I'm very familiar with it. The weather there can be very brutal at times, especially ice.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, well, let's talk a little bit about, we're here to talk about you, John, and kind of obviously I'm a huge Star Wars fan. This is one of my science fiction and all of this. But what I want to start off is talk about your animation career, and you've been doing this for 40 plus years.
Oh yeah, I started learning animation around 1972, 73, and I got my first job in 1975. So we're getting on to 49 years.
Yes. And what got you? What made you want to get into animation and art in general? And
I've always wanted to be a comic book artist or a comic strip artist. I started off wanting to be one of the things I wanted to do was be a sports cartoonist. But that's again, in the early 60s when there was still sports cartooning and newspapers. And I wanted to be like Willard Mullen. Look him up. He's the dean of all sports cartoonists. And but anyway, I wanted to be a comic book artist or a comic strip artist. I wanted to be an actor. I wanted to be a writer. I wanted to be all kinds of things. But I wound up going to school for architecture and math and science and things of that sort. So, but I was working at the New York Athletic Club on their magazine, in-house magazine staff, and I was sent down to the gym where the Olympic fencing team was practicing, and I was told to go and do some sketches, drawings, trying to capture what was going on down there. So I went down there with a pad and a pen and whatnot, and I just did some really fast sketches. That was the fastest I could do. It was about like a minute sketch. So I did several pages of them and went upstairs to the editor, and he said, and I said, and I apologized, saying I really couldn't get very much, good drawings. He said, well, this is great. This is all very great. He says, you captured motion very quickly. And so from that point on, I said, oh, okay. And then I learned about animation because I really wasn't an animator. So it wasn't until it was 1971, I believe, or so. And then came the 1972 was the the Disney 50th anniversary the retrospective from when he did his first cartoons in 1921 or so 1922 when he opened up his studio in Kansas City. So in Alice Tully Hall, there was they had a whole all the animated films that they had done, doing retrospects and showing the various features and whatnot. And I lobbed onto saying, okay, I want to see Peter Pan because that was one of my favorite ones. And so where it's about I can almost tell you what time it was when I got that bug and realized I was going to be an animator, and that was when they're flying over the streets of London, and and you're looking down on the streets of London. I'm saying, okay, this is what I want to do. So I know the location, I know the date, and I know the time. That's as close as you could say guilty as
Sure, yeah.
it's charged.
No, absolutely. I know everybody has their moment, that when they find their passion and they go, wow, that's the unlocking, and that's, no, totally there. And then you went into like now, as we kind of talked about before, I'm going to go right into talking about Boba Fett because this is, this was we've had the life day, and this is the time. I know a lot of my friends. We had this tradition of watching the holiday special every New Year's. That was our, kind of thing. We do a potluck, and that is it's funny. Um, and you know, going back, it's like you were the first person to really put Boba Fett to life. I mean, I know they were working on production models and the different versions and trying to come up with something behind the scenes. But what you put out was the first time anyone ever saw Boba Fett. This was this big awakening. I remember as a kid, everybody was like, "Oh my God, this is what everybody was talking about." Remember the action figure, the secret action figure, the Kenner action figure, um, and so, how did you get involved in this project? I mean, you go from this, you start learning your animation, go through the process, and then obviously you end up in an animation company. How did you get asked to go, hey, can you do an animation, the Faithful Wookiee, for this CBS, primetime special?
Well, this is the way I wound up at Nelvana. Now, remember I said of 1972 was when I first got the animation bug. So there was about 2 years, 2.5 years of training of just going around trying to train myself. I had a 6 month, a 6 week, one night a week summer course at the School of Visual Arts, and they had this 2 hour that night, or whatever for training. They give you these classes, and it was an old Terry Toons layout person, storyboard person. So I learned, all the very basics from that. So I did my first animation with that. Pardon me. So then I wound up. Excuse me. I wound up, taking my reels and whatnot, going to various animation houses and commercial houses in New York City because that's where I grew up. Grew up in Brooklyn, so I was living there, and so I went from one place to another, and by after dragging stuff around for about a year, I finally the studio guys said, okay, well, one of his friends was out in Long Island, Old Westbury, Long Island, New York Institute of Technology, and they were doing a feature film, Tubby the Tuba, and these were old Popeye and Mighty Mouse animators. So they said, well, if you don't mind going out that way, Well, you got to remember it wound up being a 4.5 hour round trip to get there. So I wound up there. They saw my reel, said, "Okay, well, you got the drawings and whatnot." So, well, I showed them my school reel and whatnot. And he said, "Okay, you come on and do it." So I wound up, within a few days, being hired on, and I started working there. And so for 14 months, every day, 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, I did a round trip, 4.5 hours to get there, and did that, and then put in a full 9 hour day, 8 hour day. So it was a long day for me. So I
No
learned that.
doubt.
All right, and I learned it from Mighty Mouse animators and Popeye animators, from Fleischers and Terry Toons and what have you, and then I wound up going to Richard Williams in New York, where they were doing Raggedy Ann and Andy. Okay, so I wound up being there as a supervising assistant animator, and I'm learning all the time. So this is, and then so that's so it's 14 months in one place, and then so I wound up in, say, March of '75. I wind up there and then go to Raggedy Ann in 1976, and develop my chops, and maybe did a little bit of animation, and but also supervising other assistants and whatnot. And so I was learning more, doing some more material on my own, and then the director said, this was like, oh, this is almost exactly 50. Good Lord, what is this? 1976. So it's about 46 years ago, Christmas time. He said, and we're working late hours to get it out. And he said, is anybody, he comes into my room where I'm working late with a bunch of other people in my crew. And he said, does anybody want to go to Toronto? There's want to animate in Toronto. A friend of his has a studio, and one of their animators broke their wrist and needed somebody.
Oh, wow.
So you're talking about happens chance. So, and I said, well, I waited for the person that I knew was Canadian, and the Canadian said, he was from Montreal. He says, I don't want to go to Toronto. No, he just passed on it completely. So I said, okay, I raised my hand. I'll go. So I went out with the same reel that I had from school that I'd done with live
That's
act,
awesome.
with sound,
Yeah.
with a voice track, and lip sync and all that. I took that with me, went up there. They paid for my round trip ticket, looked at my material, and they said, okay, yes, can you do 10 seconds a week of this? Can you do whatever? And I said, sure. I didn't know. I said, yeah, sure, I'll do it. And so the following week, on January 2nd of 1977, I'm up in Toronto working at Nelvana for a Cosmic Christmas. That was a studio that wound up being hired on by Lucas to do the holiday special animation. And since I was one of the senior people there, because even though I was only barely 28 years old when that happened, I still had more experience than anybody else in the studio. I had 2 feature films under my belt, worked at the Patty Freeling for Friz Freeling, one of the classic old directors of all time, Yosemite Sam and all that sort of stuff. Anyway, so I wound up and I got the role. So it's 2 years after I start as a professional that I get Boba Fett.
I mean, yeah. I mean, basically, you get one of the most iconic characters
I know. And I
in the
grabbed it
Star
because I
Wars
wanted to do the
universe. I
villain. I
mean,
wanted to do the villain. And so I'm flying by the seat of my pants, because there's only so much that as, if 2 years of experience in anything. I'm going to say, okay, well, I'm just going pure on gut and energy. And so I got that role. We did know I did not. We did not have any pencil tests, any train. So I never. The only time I saw Boba Fett was when it finally was broadcast. I was just
Oh
doing
wow.
flipping. I just flipped
Hmm.
pages. I just flipped them and said, "Okay, this is good enough." And so it was just back and forth. And so
Hmm.
all of that stuff, I didn't make any retakes.
Hmm.
So
This is all done in one take. I mean, literally, like you did in one run.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
That's crazy. And just the fact that this is this one thing, sir. And like when you started to draw and like look at like what what were you given like as a I know from working like with Lucasfilm and other projects, it's like you're not given probably a ton of information. You probably had very you may well, what did they hand off to you and say, here, make this work?
yeah. What they handed off to the studio was a schematics for the that they so much that they had for the costume. And then there was you must have seen the videotape of the white Boba Fett,
Yes, the Super
the
Commando.
Super
Yeah,
Command. That was it.
yeah.
That was it.
Wow.
Plus the request, or rather the direction to follow the styling of Mobius in Heavy Metal magazine of that night of the 1975. So that was the direction that we received as a studio. And
Well,
so
that's kind of edgy for that time period,
yes,
isn't
it
it?
is very
I mean,
edgy.
now we don't even think about that because I mean, I'm in that generation. I read heavy metal. I mean,
Okay,
this was edgy. This wasn't like these are dark tones, and
no,
ominous.
yeah. But Mobius was pastel.
Yeah.
He was very light colored, and so now one of the things that people don't realize is that, and you remember this, most TVs back then were black and white,
Yes.
and so the tonality of the color had to come through so that you couldn't have you had to gauge your colors as though you were doing a black and white film. And so people have to understand whatever success came out of that is from a bunch of very young people with minimal experience. But it came all with energy.
Hmm.
And that was the thing. And we all had a lot of energy. As I said, I was one of the probably one of the oldest animators there. I was like 28 years old. And so, we're just working away as best we can, and with for the holidays for Boba Fett, I followed the I'd already done 2 half-hour musicals with Nelvana. So I knew I really had gotten my teeth cut. I'd rather cut my teeth with doing exposure sheets and timings, and I knew how to time something. So by that point, I had had been working with exposure sheets either as an in-betweener or as an assistant animator or as an animator since 75. So basically, I understood timing, and that's being able to know how something would work over. I didn't have to shoot something to know that it was going to work in a meat and potatoes way.
Yes. No, that having that in that kind of fast timetable is very important. I mean, if you didn't have time to play with.
No,
You
No,
know,
no, 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 no. You and you also you had to make sure that the scenes all cut for a particular time. Again, TV is you are locked in. You can't go 3 seconds, 4 seconds, 5 seconds, or a minute over. You've got to cut for the commercials.
exactly. No, no, so everything has to be timed, everything perfect, and for me as someone is now saying, I watched that spot. I mean, I sat there was watching it, and I'm gonna say like that was the highlight of the whole thing. We were all waiting for that animated piece to come out.
Did you know? I mean, was there much of again? I don't
Yeah,
remember because you're right in the middle of
you're
all
busy
this.
and
I'm
yeah,
busy doing something, doing other things. We're doing the next show, and I didn't get
yeah.
any information or anything of that sort. So, what was the build up to the holiday special as to what was going to happen? What was it? What were you expecting?
Well, we knew that we were going to get to see the new villain, Boba Fett, and we knew he was a villain. Um, that and I remember like there was enough advertising for it because again as a kid I wasn't an avid television watcher. I know my mom probably was like, hey, you got to watch this, because it's my dad was Star Wars was my dad our thing. That was we watched that together. Took me to the movie theater. This was that was the first movie I ever saw. So so that was and I was impressive. I was very young at the time, and I sat through that whole movie, and it inspired me. It was like I was what 5, and I'm sitting here watching that movie and like this the starship going over it was just oh no it's just breathtaking. I mean I never saw anything like it, and characters and whatnot. And I didn't all understand all of the bigger things that as you grow up, you watch it and you see all these deeper references and plays. But it was just so captivating. So I remember going in and sitting here, and it was either I can't remember if it aired on a Friday or a Saturday. It was Saturday. It was Friday, Saturday night around 8 o'clock, 7 or 8 o'clock. I think it was a Friday, if I remember right.
I do.
But I mean,
Okay, yeah,
and I'm telling you, that's tested a lot of kids' memory.
yeah.
Um, because and it didn't feel like a Saturday, so I think I had school, and this is why I'm kind of mentally, going through all this, and and I, just sat there and okay, going through everything, and it's like you watch the kind of corny aspects of the holiday special, which is kind of endearing. I mean, you got Harvey Korman, B. Arthur. I mean, all of these stars of the television shows that I grew up on. Carol Burnett show. All of this stuff. So because I watched that as my parents, and but then I was like, okay, where is this? Where is it's like this kind of doesn't really feel like Star Wars, you know what I mean? This is more of a comedy. And when that kicked in, you're like, Luke's ship, the ship goes down, into the sludge, and then Boba Fett comes out on this beast. This was the awakening, of like, okay, this is Star Wars. This feels like Star Wars. And I remember, and I'm trying to compare it in memory of like other animation at the time. And like I mean, I remember like God, some of this stuff I probably know anymore. I mean, I grew up watching Popeye, so when you say Popeye and stuff like that, I know what you're talking about totally. The fact that you designed and worked on, which I want to talk about later, is like Dragon's Lair. That I played that game. That was breathtaking. You know what? I work in teaching and a school, and one of my high school students has Dragon's Lair on their machine, their little thing, and I'm like, okay, had you see this cool game? And I'm like, oh my god, this was like around when I was
Yeah,
in, but they thought it was totally brand new,
yeah, yeah,
But it's so funny the continuation of that. But the animation at the time, you know, it felt very, how did I say, 3D. That was the thing I got out of it. I love the kind of golden age feel of it, but it also felt captured movement better than I think any other animation that I'd seen, because most of it, I don't know, that like, I'm trying to think. At the time we had like maybe a similar style, but not quite. A bit like Thundar the Barbarian, where someone's going to go like, what's that?
yeah, yeah. You wouldn't be
You know,
getting that. Yeah, you
you got
that
more
thing.
of
It
a
was very limited
rigid.
animation.
It
TV
was.
animation. TV
It,
animation was very limited, and so what we were doing at Nelvana, we were doing much more planned, but also, first of all, there was no Thundar. That was not around. That's the 80s. That's like the late.
oh yeah, it's true. Oh, that's true. That
I
that
mean,
wasn't. That was 81.
yeah,
Yeah, something.
Thundar.
You're
Yeah.
right. I'm trying to think.
We animated that in June. June and July and August of '78. And so we were animating that material. And what we did was we were doing humanoid caricatures. And so we're doing, okay, now here's another thing. Nelvana, being a Canadian company, the artists were much more influenced by European animators than Warner Brothers. You know,
I can tell there's a lot of difference in
yeah,
the
there's a
animation.
big difference between and so therefore it felt more European, which is in the feeling that you would get from heavy metal magazine,
Yes. Yeah.
as the
Well,
comic
like
book.
Mobius himself was French, right? If I
Yes,
remember correctly.
yes, yes. And so now I'm a kid from Brooklyn, so I come in with a different element, but I'm also drawing it, thinking more acting than just trying to do a gag. I was thinking posing and timing and energy, and so following the voice of Don Franks, who did the Boba Fett's voice. You listen to his rhythms, but you also work with the limitations of the costume, which is there are no eyes or mouth. So therefore, I'm playing with tilting the helmet back and forth, up and down the roundabout, and also attitude. When you see Boba for the first time with his tuning fork rifle, I referred to it. It's more like a Bedouin sitting and looking down at you, with his long rifle. And so, but when he's but my attitude about how to approach that character of Boba Fett was, think you've got the Clint Eastwood's Man with No Name, and also Jack Palance in Shane.
Yeah. No, no, totally could see that.
Okay, so you have those two characters, especially the way Balance would sit and sort of lean over and talk, on the horse, he'd be looking down at you from his throne and that sort of thing. Very, very, very whipped, very wiry type of raw boned, character, and he was very, very nice and easy and measured in terms of how he would stand and how he would, move his, body and whatnot. And then, but I also, so I took that as my basic approach to how I was going to physically animate the character, the Boba Fett. And then, you know, I said, okay, take the element of the rifle and and if he's a mean bounty hunter, he'll hit that. He'll hit the beast, which is not going to feel anything, But Lucas gave instructions to punch the beast in the nose in the script. Well, there's no way that he was going to be able to punch the nose.
Yeah.
So I would slap him around with the rifle to get him to make an impression of some sort.
Yeah. But no, but that definitely showed like, his character, which is like, it's like that little bit of foreshadowing, and that in the end, because he's, because we all were like, I mean, I was confused. I was like, wait a minute, this guy's the bad guy, right? And I'm like waiting for him to do something bad, those time period, I'm waiting for that bad thing. And I was like, oh, look, he hit the animal, and, this is a sign, and a little bit of foreshadowing of that. No, and like, did the rifle, where did the rifle concept come from? Was it given to you in some way, or did you
No,
just like,
no, no.
just totally drew it?
The instructions were, the instruction in the script was he takes out a tuning fork and hits it, and that drives the beast away. When it's the opening scene, he just pulls out a tuning fork. That's what it was. So a prop department came up with, at Nelvan and said, well, we'll give him a rifle with a tuning fork on it, and that's what we did.
Well, now, but look at where this has been canonized years later in The Mandalorian.
Yep.
With the pulse rifle, it's like, it's like when I saw that was the first time I watched The Mandalorian and saw that, I was like, oh my god, it's now it's canonized.
Yes, and they had, I mean, for so many decades, nobody wanted to accept the cartoon as being part of canon.
Yes, and I love the fact that got brought in. Personally, I love the rifle. I am the guy that like loved. I thought it was a very unique design, especially now knowing the amount of direction you got on it. I'm like, okay, and and I thought that'd be really cool. But I thought the rifle was amazing. I was like, why isn't this used in anything else?
Well,
it has that unique flair. It looks spacey. It does.
Yeah. The handling the rifle was an interesting thing for me because just in high school I went to a military high school, Jesuit military high school in Manhattan, and I was part of the trick drill team. So we used M1s and blades to do our and one of the tricks was just passing the rifle from one person to another and tossing it and turning it around, very much like you would do the old guard and so that's what we were doing. So when he tosses the rifle from one side to that was just something I'd already done, and so I figured, I said, and there was no direction as to how to move off, at the end. When he's on his mount on the lizard on the beast, there was nothing to say. Okay, move. All they said was just, and he moves off. So I just said, okay, toss it, whack, move.
Yes. No, that makes perfect sense. It's like, and it actually, I don't know, feels more realistic. It's like, because as let's face it, if you've ever been on a horse, and you're like trying to move, it's like, you have certain gestures you can do, with your legs and like,
and there's no, you can't do it. There was no place to do that. You had to, and yes. First of all, the horse, the lizard, the dragon is not going to have, feel anything.
Yes.
Yeah,
and this thing is armored. It's like huge. It's like it's a tap.
Yeah, so that's all it was to him. To it was just a tap.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. I mean, and then and like some of the angles I thought was really cool too. Like I know that my one of my favorite scenes, I know it's probably is like where he is like where I think it's the stormtroopers are coming through or something, and Boba Fett pushes Chewbacca back in the archway, and for a cartoon, I thought was very interesting. It was like, you had Boba Fett looking up and at different angles that you really didn't see because, like, most of the time the cartoons were fake. It was kind of very two dimensional. I don't know how else to describe it. I'm not the skilled as an animator, but it's like they felt very two dimensional.
Well, there's a lot of cartoons that would be pretty much eye level. And so what we were doing, we were using it was trying to make it look like an animated comic book, and comic books always had those angles. So
Cinematic, they had that cinematic angles to the what I
yes,
would call now.
yeah, yeah, and that's and that the aspect to it all is that you have to be able to draw all these various angles and believable. So you don't have to be realistic. You have to be believable. Otherwise you'd see too much lower chin. You have to angle it and make sure that the camera stage it in such a way that the character can move in a believable way, but also feel a bit more cartoony. Not cartoony, dynamic is the best
Yes,
way to look.
yeah,
You
and yeah, that's and like you kind of said this a little bit ago, the difficulties of like carrying like a character like Boba Fett and using emotions and like and you because you have to use the full body or the angles and the thing or I mean I remember this the turning of the head where you could get more of the sharp angles of the end of the T visor and it would give that illusion of facial movement.
yes, that was the idea
you
of
know
doing it, and so that it could be done. Because I was trying to be as realistic as possible in terms of keeping a hard helmet. I didn't want to, start playing around with it, So I did that. I did the tilts as I could, and I tilted maybe a little more, or maybe not as much. But the timing had to be rhythmic to the dialogue, and so that helped. Following that, the way the dialogue was spoken. So, but once again, you have to do a lot of experimentation on thumbnails, and that's what I did. I did a lot of that before drawing, and so if the plan is there, then you follow it. So
no no it was carried out beautifully and like I mean obviously the rest is history. People saw this and I remember that was the highlight of the Kenner action figure coming out, and that was like the whole this the world was different back then. I mean, like now it's like that we're so over merged with stuff and commercialism. It's like and it's inundated on every screen we're on. There, it was it was a little bit more like pinpoint and strategic. And I remember that was what every kid was waiting for was that in the mail, and set it that up.
back then, remember, uh, there were no toys
Yeah.
because nobody was expecting it to happen that way, and
hmm
so you know,
No, yeah, absolutely. And I mean, George Lucas being absolutely a brilliant person, like saw that merchandising would be a way to go
mhm.
because everybody thought he was crazy. It's like, oh yeah, well, you can have those. No one's gonna. You
Yeah,
always go buy some toys.
yeah. Well, and that's the thing is that the closest that you had were the little green soldiers
Yeah.
for kids because GI Joe did not exist until afterwards.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely.
You know, so
Yeah,
you
you
didn't.
didn't have anything like that in which other projects, and I know you had some work in like He-Man and
Yeah,
like She-Ra, and that those were like all later. I mean,
yeah,
Star Wars, I was like, you might have had a lunchbox. That was prior to that. Remember the
yeah,
metal
yeah.
lunchboxes?
That's right. And that's the thing about it is that there was uh, a lunchbox. Well, the closest thing to to madness would have been the Davy Crockett craze of the 1955. Is that, and I grew up with that. Everybody wanted a coonskin cap, and they were in very short supply. You know.
It's so funny this how it's that, but there's been very little, and then all of a sudden, when the toys came out, and like
Well,
it was a totally different world for after post Star Wars.
yes, because suddenly they realized it had first at first it would be for girls with Barbie, and they said, well, we got all that stuff that Barbie and whatnot. No. But you know what? They said, okay, what will boys play with besides trucks? And so suddenly, if you've got adventures that people can replay, then you got something. So
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
yeah.
Because I past that, it was toy soldiers in some way, shape, or form. That was it.
Well, yeah. Well, you'd have just these little models, that
Yeah,
like that,
or
and then
planes,
you
or
play that
yeah.
sort of thing, and games, and just
Hmm.
little cannons that
Yeah.
would shoot little
Oh
plastic
yeah, I
ball
remember
things.
that now.
Yeah, we had gun. Okay, you. This is from my youth as a 7 or 8, 9 year old. Okay, Mattel had Colt 45s that had spring ejecting bullets that they shot
Wow.
with caps that were
Yeah, I had the
on the
cap
cap.
guns, but not the ejecting.
No, that yeah,
Whoa.
you put little round caps that were on
Yeah.
there, and then you could float up your gun and shoot. You'd have the
Hmm.
cap explosion, and then the projectile going out, maybe about 5 or 6 feet.
Oh wow, that had to be cool as a kid.
Oh yeah, I had one of those. I had one, and that also you had Winchesters the same way. Mattel was that way. So, but then you had the traditional cap gun that everybody had from the 1930s on, as a rite of passage. Hopalong Cassidy, Roy Rogers, you all had a six gun, whatnot. But once again, it was a different time period, and I'm not going to get into the difference in society. All I know is that there was a lot more danger that you had to learn how to circumnavigate as a group of people. I mean, everybody had a pocket knife.
Yes. Yeah. I mean,
Everybody,
I took them to school. I mean, I had my pocket knife in my pocket all the time.
right? And everybody had that, and everybody had an understanding that you do not. Well, again, the society, you do not, you know, take a gun to a knife fight. I mean, there's a
Yeah.
code, and not to be
Hmm.
facetious about it, but I never thought that of you getting into a fight and thinking that I had to be worried about more than just my fists.
Exactly. Exactly. No, that's absolutely right. Because it would have never crossed our minds. You walk around with a knife in your pocket all the time, but you would never take it out. Except to cut tool. It's a tool.
Yeah, yeah,
It's not a weapon. It's a
yeah.
tool.
Only switchblades.
Yes.
Those were for bad guys.
Those were the bad guys. You remember that? That was always how you knew the bad guy because he'd hold out the
Yeah,
switch knife
yeah.
and switchblade, and he'd come up, and it'd be like, and there'd be just that focus on the knife. This is the guy that's out to get people. Yeah, totally different, but it was a different way of looking at things. Totally. So, I want to talk a little bit about time for where time is, I guess. So what happened post Star Wars? Or so you did you've done this. So what other projects did you become part of? I mean, obviously, I want to talk about some of the stuff you're doing now because I think it's really cool, the educational stuff and that. But what about your career? I mean, this is the way we spent like 30 minutes talking about this little tiny bit. I mean, I feel awful actually it's because it's so much fun, but it's like this is one little type of a very, like you said, a 49-year career,
Well,
and
just
it's
to
still
go,
going. It's still going.
yeah. Well, with the comic with the web comics and with my own, with my material, the thing about it is that the I will swing it over that with it's sort of bookending the Boba Fett material bookends my years because I come up with the Boba Fett book where all the material that you've seen in terms of the script, the storyboard panels, the or not storyboard panels, but rather the model sheets and some of my original drawings. I put it all together, and that now people can get access to that they wouldn't have before. This is more. This is basically a place that people can collect and look at it, and it's historical document. These are what we worked with, and that's the material. And so, therefore, after all these years, you could see what little material we had to work with, and you never know what's going to happen. What with the material. But to get back to it, after the Star Holiday Special, I was at Nelvana for another 6 years. Worked on the first all Canadian animated feature, Rock and Rule, which is a very garage band style of animation story. And the soundtrack is Cheap Trick, Earth, Wind and Fire, Deborah Harry, Lou Reed, and Iggy Pop. So that's very edgy,
Very,
especially very edgy. So
especially time period wise.
even now, you go back and you say, okay, you could feel where how the edginess is because everybody else is coming out of that.
Yes, yes.
It's different for people to say, "Oh, that looks kind of old-fashioned and whatnot." Wait a minute; those are the
No,
seeds of what everything else came out of.
absolutely.
Okay,
They bore
so
fruit later. They bore a
yes,
lot of
but
fruit.
there were a lot. But that was that. So I worked on Rock and Rule. I did the police chief. I did Mylar, the club owner, and Cindy Schlepper, the tall, bosomy gal on roller skates. So those were my three characters that I did by myself. The so I worked on that. Went on to after I left Nelvana, I worked on some of the shows. Did Strawberry Shortcake, Herself the Elf. Did some material. Those were all from characters from Cleveland. They were, through with Hallmark cards. Okay. Then I wound up at Bluth's. I was going to work on I was going to get hired on by Brad Bird and Jerry Reese if they ever came up with the Spirit animated feature, but that never happened. But I would have been on that. The was working on. You're familiar with the Spirit?
Yes,
No,
not the animated movie about the horse.
no, no,
No,
no.
no, I know, I'm joking. I'm just saying that to
Yes,
people
yeah,
who may not.
yeah. That's
Yes,
very
yes.
noir. It's very noir.
Very noir. It's very noir.
So you have, yeah, yeah. There was that, but then but that didn't that wasn't going to be happening. So I
Yeah.
went to Don Bluth's on Dragon's Lair and Space Ace. Worked at
Yes.
that. Went to Ruby and Space. As a kid, did you ever watch the show called Turbo Teen?
Yes.
I was
I
on that
can't.
as a layout.
Oh, really? Oh, awesome. No, it's so funny because but it's so funny. Like even look at the animation and stuff. Like playing like Dragon's Lair, it was the only time it was like you were in a cartoon. It was such a cool concept of like instead of just watching and now animation like computer animation is so intense you can't tell the difference. You're playing a video game, you're almost looking at a picture now, and that. But back then, I was like my spaceships were like four little dots, and then you're like I'm paying from Galaga to Dragon's Lair, and it's like, oh my gosh, there's real movement. There's, you're swinging the sword and like it looks like a real, image. You can tell what it is and not like trying to use your imagination to understand that the three little black dots on top is the guy's hair, like, or whatever that is. And that had to have been a fun project. I mean,
It
just
was. It was highly intensive because remember it's Disney style animation, and there's a certain level of craftsmanship and drawing chops that goes into each of those scenes, and you were really tested because it wasn't cartoony. It was caricatured, but it wasn't Fleischer cartoons. It wasn't Betty Boop. It wasn't Popeye. It was Disney style.
I mean, you had a degree of shading. It had depth. It had
Yeah,
feel to it.
all of that.
Same
Yeah,
with Space Ace. I mean, same
yeah,
with Space Ace.
yeah, yeah. So all of that material was done. A lot of my time was spent doing the death scenes. So you probably saw my scenes a lot.
Hmm. Yes, yes. As a frustrated child playing this game, going, "Mom, can I have more quarters?"
There
Because you
you
could
go.
continue it. That's the other thing that was really cool about the game. You could put more money in and continue it, as opposed to us dying and having to go all the way back to the beginning. If you put like a countdown on it, and you can, that was cutting edge at the time too, because the rest of the time you just had to start over from round one and work all the way.
Well, I was never able to win. I was never able to do anything because I was just I was by that time I was an old man, and so therefore you just when you're doing that, I'm 34 years old. My reflexes are not as good, you know.
Yeah.
So
No, I totally get it. I get it. It's like, when I was younger now, it's like video games. I can't even think about like playing them. It's not my thing anymore. Even though I grew up playing it and loving them, it's just like now it's like, that's a younger person's craft.
yep, that's true. That's true.
Yeah.
Well, let's see. Okay, so I was at Filmation for He-Man and She-Ra. I worked on they were trying to do feature films also that with their own versions of Snow White and Pinocchio. So I worked on those. Uh, then I worked on some Batman commercials. If
Yeah.
if
You
you
met some like iconic drawings of Batman.
yeah, the Zellers Batman commercials with the Riddler, the Penguin, and Catwoman. So I animated all those for a Canadian company. It was one of my friends from Nelvana, and he had set up his own commercial house, and so we did those in 87. 1987, 88. I did them as I was living in Rhode Island at the time, so and faxing each drawing.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Again, probably some of our audience will not even know what a fax machine is.
Well, a lot of people won't even know what dial up is.
Yes,
And
true.
that's what we had. We had dial up. There was no
Dial up.
internet yet.
Yes. You had to go over your phone line. You could not take a call unless you had the cool split.
Yes, yes. I had a dedicated fax line. So that's what we did. So it would take about a minute to 2 minutes a drawing. So I would and so I would do the drawings of the day, and then I would crosshair them for registration, put them down. I let them out. They're about like 30, 20 to 25 to 30 drawings a day. Drop it down into the little slot there, and it would start automatic feeder. And so it would take about, I'd say, a good hour and a half to to fax
No,
all
I
the
could
drawings.
imagine.
You know,
And you had to get confirmation to make sure they went
yeah, that they,
through.
they all went through. I would start it at the end of the day, and I would let it go and happen, and then by the end of before going to bed, I would know whether or not they went through.
Oh,
You know,
exactly.
and then
And no, and that's the only way I could compare it to, like, someone who's not in it. It's like saying scanning. Imagine scanning a document and not having it instantaneous. And you didn't scan it where you could see it on a device or thing. You would literally scan it, digitize it, and transmit it to another device that interpreted it, read, and then printed it out on the other side. And it's like people like say I said that something about fax one time, and I just had a bunch of people look at me like I was crazy. Like, what are you talking about? This.
it's the
You mean the
equivalent.
FAQs? You mean the FAQs? No, not no. That's FAX.
It's kind of like saying, you know what, Sonny, I was a Pony Express rider.
Exactly. That is exactly what that's like. No, it's like, oh, you were that guy. No, it's like, you're doing this, and that's how business worked. I mean, it didn't matter what. I mean, you're doing it for illustrations. People would send documents that way.
They still do that.
Yes. It
They
is more
still,
secure in a lot of ways.
yeah, because you can't. It's not internet. That's why
Yes.
That's why they say I want a fax, especially if they want something like that. We want a fax of it because it can't
Hmm.
be interfered with.
Hmm. But
You know,
it's still a rare, but still people are. It is such an interesting thing how in such a little time how much the world has changed technology wise.
I worked on
So.
for 10 years. I worked for on education direct to home videos with Nest. We did American history. We did Bible stories. We did a whole bunch of stuff for 10 years. So I worked on that, and then then computers came and threw me out of business.
Mm, yeah,
In
that's
2001,
painful.
2002, that was it for me. That was it. And by that point, I've gone past, the ceiling, the 50-year-old. And so they don't, they're thinking, nope, we don't want to pay for you to learn how to do something because you'll need more money than kids coming out of college. And they already know.
Yeah.
And
No,
so
it's
that
full. No, I understand that too.
So that was the thing, and then now I do my own comics because I'm retired. I can do whatever I want, and I'm doing my own comics and web comics, and to me, it's enabling me to have the same energy and edginess that I was able to do when I was at Nelvana.
Hmm.
The same
Oh,
kind of
that's awesome.
edginess. Yeah, the same edginess that we had with Boba Fett and with Rock and Rule is what I can do with this comic. It's more of a from the 1960s Zap
Hmm.
comics. It's more of an underground
Yeah.
comic thing. I don't know if you've had a chance to read
No,
any of it. You know,
no, I have. I'll be honest, I have not. I really want to. I've kind of got to that point. I was going to start delving into that
yeah,
because I've actually been following you and like looking at stuff, and I really want to take a look at it.
yeah,
In fact, what? Please send me all of the links to all of your
sure,
media sites and everything that you have, so we can put that into
okay,
everything we're doing.
yeah,
So, because we want to get you, because I mean, I looked at your YouTube channel alone, and it's got such great videos of talking about just education,
Yeah. Oh
just
yeah. Well,
teaching people outside the old arts, and what it is, even and it's still applicable to
yes.
the computer world.
Yes.
All the things are still applicable because, I mean, you were helping teach people like that actually became Pixar.
Well,
you know,
well, the thing is that Pixar, Edmund Catmull, who, when I was at Tubby the Tuba, this is where your book ending. There's another bookend aspect to it. At New York Tech, the reason that they were doing this was Alexander Shore. That was the reason that he was producing and funding Tubby the Tuba was to learn how to do computer animation. How does the graphic? What does a computer have to know how to do and be able to do to replicate the art form and what is done in traditional animation. So the person who is working on this and gathering all this information and studying it is Edmund Catmull on the other side of the campus. And out of that comes Photoshop and all of the graphics that you see today. So a lot of that had already been there's a paper that I pulled out, and I think somebody else has got it also. But he pulled together all of his diagnostic aspects of what needs to be done, and then published it as his treatise or what have you. And that was what they did, and that they already was doing the first paintings on screen, digital paintings then. But they hadn't reached a certain point of being able to do, we still Johnny Gent, who was the Popeye anime, he was the guy who was really really cool at Tubby, and he was the best Popeye artist of the 40s and 50s, and he was his one of his jobs was to go from the two-dimensional of drawing with pencil, and they'd be taking him over to where he said, "Here's this bar of soap with a line, connected to it." They didn't call it a mouse yet. It was still a bar of soap, and he's trying to on a tablet, and he's got he has to look at the screen and hand an eye motion, try to draw and connect your line. You can't lift the thing off of your and put it back on. So a pencil, your hand doesn't work the same way. And to be able to make an encasement of a shape so that it can encase and capture color without it bleeding out into the rest of the screen. That's the beginning.
That really is. That is the beginning of all the stuff we see now,
Yeah.
as they keep storming. I mean, think about that.
Yeah.
I mean, even in practice, outside animation, outside of what do you consider animated movies?
Oh, everything.
The CGI that we use, like the prequels couldn't even happen. Star Wars couldn't even happen without all of this stuff.
Yeah. So all of that. Yeah. He become he gets hired on by Lucas after he finishes his time period at New York Tech, which is about 1978. I'm already in Canada at that time, but he finishes his study and his period of time there of looking at what the Tubby the Tuba was doing. He then gets hired on by Lucas at Lucas Ranch, where they start ILM, which becomes Pixar.
Yeah. That's just amazing. It's just like we're all interrelated. It ties together. It's so much, and no, it's brilliant. Well, John, I have taken over an hour of your time, including our technical
Yeah.
difficulty at the beginning, which I appreciate your patience so much through. Um, it's been a real, I mean, a treat. I can't think of another word. Just listening to the history here that you have, and the stories, and it's great. It's like, this is breath for me, and we're separated by a little bit of time. So I mean, I remember what you're talking about. I was a kid, you know, and it's so fascinating to hear like what was going on in the background, and this. And I know our audiences will love hearing more of this, and look forward to hearing more from you. And I really do want to go check out your work on the book, your current comic series, because I mean I love the kind of Zap kind of those kind of comics. They had a special place. They really did. Don't get me wrong, I love the Marvel mainstream and all that, and DC, but they had a special place.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
with
I'm
those,
my tendency. Mine. I'm more like the fabulous freak brothers. I'm more of the underground. Um, in more of the heavy metal. And in fact, it's that's what I do is a bit more heavy metalish from the 1970s with my web comic, because it's mature, it's mature material, but it's not anything that you wouldn't see at HBO.
exactly. And that's the way I describe it. Like when like heavy metal, and there was like, I mean, people forget like Marvel had their mature, like was Epic Illustrated back in the day. They tried their hand because of the success of heavy metal. Um, that was like, those were the cutting edge. Some of the and great stories you can't tell to the comic book authority and everywhere else. These were great stories that you could like. It had its own area, and I think it's brilliant. I love that whole scene. It's a great thing. You're continuing it because I see that I see a lot of that is like you know it's a new frontier out there with comics. It really
And it
is.
should be. I think I look at it as I mean, I'm not the first one to say it, but comics as an art form is very underrated because it's used as a commercial, loss leader for, and not even for movies, because the movies are very different from the comics.
Hmm.
Those are two different
Absolutely.
things. So, but being able to tell stories, and that aren't, there's no agenda other than telling a good story, but it's more. I'm more along the lines. My influences as a writer are more like Ray Bradbury,
Oh yeah.
Rod Serling, Edgar Rice Burroughs, um, oh, geez, Chester Gould with Dick Tracy. There's a lot that you don't see today because you're not allowed to, and unfortunately, and for all those grandparents and parents, not everything has to be safe for kids. you know so I mean, everything, I've worked on everything, and there's a time and place, and some things are mature and some things are not mature. So hey, I mean, have a little more of a, it's more European, but you know what, that's so there's a whole world out there that you need to see. And
Yes.
so,
And I think it's like it is an art form that I think can capture a lot more than traditional. I mean, some people would argue like, well, can't you do traditional cinema for that or whatever? And I said, no, I don't. I think this genre has the ability to do things that you can't do with live actors. You can't do with the whole storytelling process. And I think you said that earlier on. It's like you wanted to do all these things. You wanted to be a writer. You wanted to be an actor. You wanted to do all these like parts of this. And in this industry, you can do all that in one. Really, you're really doing it all.
Yes, yes. You control. Listen, it's your sense of what is entertaining, but also what is it that you're saying. If you don't have something to say, then you're a technician. If you're an artist, you have to have a point of view. And what are you presenting how are you presenting your point of view, and what is your point? If art is to make the viewer think, it doesn't have to be a great thing, but it might evoke you to. I'm not telling you. This is the Jesuit thing. I learned, as a Jesuit training
Yes.
is. I'm not going to tell you what to think.
What to think.
I want you to understand and learn the process of thinking.
Absolutely. No,
And
that is very true. I think that ability to, like, you know, give the data, you lead them around there, and let them piece it together.
yeah,
You know,
and
and
and and
even if you don't come out agreeing with me, it's better.
I want to
It's
understand
better.
how you came up. Okay, it's kind of like when you do a math problem. And what are the
Yes.
rules here? Let me see. What is your process? How did you come up with this thing here? Okay, what are you going by? And that's where it's very important for. I'll go this far. Is that people need the correct information and being able to discern what is truthful and what is not truthful. And there's a certain point where if you stay, and you'll read this in my web comic, if you build a wall around yourself, you forget, and it's to because of your fear of what's on the other side of the wall, and you don't know what's on the other side of the wall. You really don't have a whole picture of what's happening.
No. Yeah, absolutely right. You only get what you're being fed. You know, one way or another. And let's face it. I think thinking and critical thinking are very important
Hmm.
in this. And as someone who teaches people, and it's one of my things is, I want you to think about the answer. Come to this, you come to your own conclusion. I'm not to tell you what's right or wrong in history. You come to your own conclusion, but here is the data. Now write down it and tell me why you think that. Not because I told you that this was a bad thing or this was a good thing or this was how these two are connected. Why do you think they're connected? And I think that's something that we miss a lot, is that we just want the answer, and we want a short, pithy answer. We don't
Yeah,
even want a
it's
long answer.
complicated. It's more complicated than that. But you know what? Sometimes it's not that complicated.
Yeah, no, it really is. Yeah,
It,
yeah,
it, it still boils down to, if you go dig deep enough, you could then understand where somebody made this decision to do something. And then you can go back and you say, okay, what is why did they do that? What is making them do that? And what?
exactly. What is that
So,
motivation that's pushing them? And why two people may in the same situation may have reacted differently. you know and I think those are all things that you've got to, like, really, when you're developing a character, and that kind of thing, you've got to really take their story, what's going on in their head, what they see as evil, what do they see as good. Those could all be, you know
oh yeah,
it's like you take.
you've just said what Bloodwing Fire Fist Angel is all about. Is Yeah,
Oh, yes, that is.
yeah, you
I
go.
recognize the title.
You got to go in there and take a look at it. It's
I
basic.
will.
Yeah, it is. When you have an angel who is plucked out of the choir and is used as a pawn between the forces of good and evil, and and promises are broken by supposedly the forces of good, and the person think the universe is ripped apart but then restitched, and then suddenly it was all different now. What is morality? Who is and an angel has to figure it out.
Well, that is a very deep thing, and you know what, John, I'm going to leave our
Yeah,
audience on
there you
that.
go.
Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for your time. It's been such a pleasure. I really could sit here and talk to you for a couple
That's
hours, but I know we're
okay.
running
Hey,
out of
listen,
time.
no.
I
That's fine. I just want to leave the people with just just something, a
so
food for
please,
thought. Yes, there you go. And I'll get you send you the link. I have a link
please.
tree, and that goes to everything. So you can get, it has a whole list of everything that's on
Because we want to
all my
definitely share
websites.
what you're doing,
Yeah,
and this is some good stuff. But
yeah.
if you got one thing you want to say to our audience after on the close of this, and just you want to say, this is your chance. Just what
Um,
would you say to the people out there watching the video today?
um, if you're a Star Wars really aficionado, which is where we're talking with right now, um, there is there is the book, but I would say that always open your mind up. If anybody could be, you say that people could say, I can't draw, I can't write. Yes, you can. All you have to do is open your mind and ask a question, and then start thinking about where you want to lead, and just start. If you have a hunger to write or draw or create, just 15 minutes a day, a half hour a day, instead of going to the online, just start reading up on what it takes, what you need to do, and then in a year you'll wind up far, with a lot more knowledge than what you have now, creatively. I don't know if that's
No, I think I really think that is really brilliant. I think saying that is like people live a lot with I can't or I don't know how, I don't know what to do. And I think this kind of comes full circle with you. You could have said at all these points in your like even in the beginning when you were like doing the Olympic photo, the drawings, because I'm sure they couldn't have photographers in there, and you had to go in and draw it, and you can say I don't know how to do this. I'm an architect. I'm like, this is not my thing. And then you think about how all that is, and saying instead of saying, okay, I'm gonna try and see what I can do, and and take back, you know, you came back like you were traveling and doing all this stuff with your reel that you basically did in this night, basically night course that you took in animation, and this was your thing that got you through all of these little hoops. And you could have said at any time, "Well, this is beyond me. I can't do this. I can't. I mean, I can't do Star Wars. I can't do this. I can't do that." I mean, and instead, I think, it shows a lot of just sometimes raising your hand, and I mean, we all got to know when we're outmatched, but and ask for help. But at the end of the day, a lot of times we can miss a lot of opportunities because we don't feel good enough about it, or well, my artwork's not that good, or my writing isn't, or whatever.
everything is I'm self-taught, whether it be writing or drawing. I didn't go to school for any of it, but it's through everyday practice and developing and putting yourself out there, and not worrying about whether or not you fall flat on your face or whatnot. But you know what, you're just always going to, you just keep on going, you keep moving, and just don't. It's not so much it's not arrogance. It's, if you have a passion for it, well then find somebody who, or follow somebody who knows more than you. Ask questions if you can. Study what they're doing. learn how to study. Just- and spend some time that instead of uh, doing rolling through, whether it be Twitter, X, Instagram, or what have you. My morning breakfast is I take a half hour for breakfast at least, and I'm drawing. I'll have my breakfast. I maybe watch a little TV, and then I have a pad and pencil, and I'm doodling. You could write, you could write that way, you could draw that way. And with before you know it, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, a half hour, you get lost into it and you've done it and you go, okay, what have I learned? Well, I've learned hand control. I've put words together. I've put some ideas together. Ideas are what starts everything. So journal, I'm not talking about journaling. I'm not talking about complete thoughts, just things that might spark you.
Hmm. No, absolutely. Because these are really notes to yourself.
Yes.
They really are.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
No, absolutely. I think like people forget how easy, like you're saying that 25 minutes, how, I think the one thing that keeps people at bay a lot of times, they feel like they've got to put hours in to do whatever they're doing, whatever it is, physical, if they're going to do, learn a sport or whatever. They got to put hours and hours in. And I think sometimes it's all about doing little steps and short amount of time. And I've learned some of the coolest things I've learned recently is by the saying, I got 10 minutes on lunch. I'm going to work on this. And I don't have a full dedication, but I can at least have 10, 15 minutes. And I sit down, all right, go out and I'll move, do whatever I'm trying to practice. I'm going to do. If it's physical, if it's more mental with writing or something, I'm going to sit down and do it for that 15 minutes. And for 15 or 20 minutes or 30 minutes, whatever you dedicate, if you do that and you do it on a ritual, and you know you're going to do it, this is something you're holding yourself accountable for. It's better than trying to dedicate all this time in huge blocks that never really seems to happen.
Yeah. Here.
It's,
Post-it note. Okay.
yeah.
You write one
Exactly.
idea on it. If you've got an idea there, that's right. Write one idea on it, take it and put it on an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, and then put another idea, put it on top of that. And then you start thinking of what your story might be, or it might be an idea or a conclusion. Just piecing those things, putting them down. That's how you start building.
Mhm.
So, and that's how
Brick
I
by
do
brick.
everything.
Yeah,
So,
and it becomes one brick in a minute. I put the bricks together. That's how you
yeah,
get a
yeah,
you get a building.
yeah,
So something to show for it.
yeah,
Well, John, thank you so much. I can't help wish you a happy new year,
yeah,
blessed new year coming forward,
yeah.
and all your endeavors. Good luck with everything. Send our list stuff over, and
Yes, we'll
as a
do.
reminder, yeah, and then I'm gonna from there. But thank you all, and thanks for joining us
Yes.
here at Collector's Maze. This is Bill Holmes again, signing off. Take care and have a great new year.
Take care. Bye bye.